The letter arrived with no postmark, no signature, just 10 words that changed everything. Pack up. Leave by sunset. This is your only warning. Thomas Garrett crumpled the paper in his weathered fist, watching dust devils dance across the valley that had been his home for 32 years. The wind carried the scent of his cattle, his crops, his sweat-soaked dreams. Behind him, the ranch house creaked with memories, his wife's laughter echoing from the kitchen where she died 3 winters ago, his son's boot prints still pressed into the mud by the barn door before he'd left for the war and never came back. The morning sun stretched long shadows across the property, but something felt different today. Wrong. His cattle stood bunched together near the water trough, heads raised, ears twitching toward the ridgeline. Even his old dog, Rex, paced the porch, with hackles raised, whining low in his throat. Thomas had built this place with his bare hands, cleared every stone, dug every fence post, birthed every calf during bitter winter nights. The deed sat locked in his strongbox, signed and witnessed, bought with 20 years of cavalry pay and blood money from Shiloh. No court in Texas would side against him. But courts didn't matter when men rode with torches. He'd heard the whispers in town. New railroad company buying up land for a southern route. Big money from back east. Some folks took their offers and left peaceful. Others just disappeared one night, leaving behind empty houses and graves that couldn't be found. The Hendricks place, 2 miles north, abandoned last month after their barn burned down. The Morrison spread, 5 miles east, sold quick after their prize bull turned up dead with its throat cut. Pattern clear as scripture. Thomas walked to the barn, his boots echoing in the sudden stillness. His rifle hung above the workbench, loaded in rees. 80. Beside it, a faded tintype of Sarah smiled down at him, forever young, forever believing in the life they were building together. A sound drifted across the valley, distant hoofbeats, maybe 4 or 5 horses, coming slow and deliberate, not the rhythm of neighbors dropping by. This was business. Dark business. Rex growled low, positioning himself between Thomas and the approaching riders. Thomas lifted the rifle, checking the action one more time. The metal felt cold, familiar, like an old friend he'd hoped never to see again. 32 years of peace was about to end. The hoofbeats grew louder. 5 riders emerged from the heat shimmer, spreading wide as they approached, a half circle of shadows against the morning light. Thomas recognized their leader, Marcus Webb, the railroad company's negotiator, a pale man who wore his gun like jewelry and his smile like a threat. "Morning, Garrett," Webb called out, not dismounting. "Beautiful day to travel, wouldn't you say?" Thomas stepped onto his porch, rifle cradled loose in his arms. "My traveling days are behind me, Webb." "That's unfortunate." Webb's smile never wavered. "See, progress waits for no man. Railroads coming through here whether you're standing in the way or not. Got papers that say this land belongs to me." "Papers burn, Garrett. Houses burn. Barns burn." Webb's eyes glittered. "Sometimes people burn too, when they're too stubborn to listen to reason." The other riders shifted in their saddles, hands drifting toward weapons. Thomas recognized 2 of them, drifters who'd been hanging around the saloon, drinking too much and talking too little. The kind of men who worked for whoever paid best and asked no questions about the work. "You killed the Hendricks' cattle," Thomas said quietly. "Prove nothing of the sort," Webb replied. "Accidents happen to folks who don't take good advice." Thomas felt Sarah's presence beside him, the way she used to stand when facing down traveling preachers or snake oil salesmen. She'd never backed down from bullies, not once. Always said a man's word and a woman's courage were the only currencies worth having. "I'm not leaving," Thomas said. Webb sighed theatrically. "That's truly unfortunate, Mr. Garrett, because you see, this isn't really a negotiation anymore. Company's been patient, company's been generous, but patience has limits." One of the riders spat tobacco juice into Thomas's flower bed, Sarah's roses that she'd brought all the way from Alabama, now blooming wild and untended. The casual disrespect hit Thomas harder than any threat. "Sunset," Webb continued. "Pack whatever fits in a wagon and ride out peaceful. Or don't, and we'll bury what's left with the ashes." The riders began to turn, their message delivered, but Webb paused, studying Thomas with cold calculation. "Oh, and Garrett, that rifle you're holding, might want to count your ammunition real careful. We'll be counting it too." As they rode away, dust hanging in the air like gun smoke, Thomas realized they knew exactly how many shells he had. They'd been watching him, learning his habits, studying his defenses. He was one man against five, maybe more. But he was one man on his own land, and that had to count for something. The day stretched like a held breath. Thomas spent it preparing, checking every sight line from the house, filling water buckets in case of fire, moving ammunition to strategic spots. Rex followed him everywhere, sensing the tension, whimpering when Thomas cleaned his pistol for the third time. By afternoon, smoke appeared on three horizons. Not campfire smoke, building smoke, thick and black and wrong. The Petersons' place to the north, the old Mitchell homestead to the east. Empty properties, but the message was clear. This is what happens to abandoned land. Thomas stood on his porch as shadows lengthened, watching the smoke rise like funeral pyres. Sarah's garden rustled in the wind, her roses releasing their perfume into air that tasted of ash and threat. At 4 o'clock, a lone rider approached. Not Webb, but someone Thomas recognized. Billy Morrison, whose family had sold out 3 weeks ago. "Thomas," Billy called out, staying well back from the house. "Got a message for you." "Say your piece." Billy's voice cracked. "They got my Jenny." The words hit Thomas like a physical blow. Jenny Morrison, Billy's daughter, barely 16 and sweet as church bells. "What do you mean, got her?" "Took her this morning, said she's safe, said she'll stay safe, long as you're reasonable about things." Billy's face was haggard, aged 10 years and 3 weeks. "They ain't asking for your land anymore, Thomas. They're telling." Thomas's grip tightened on his rifle. Using a child as leverage, there was no lower pit for a man to fall into. "Where is she?" "Don't know. Don't matter. You fight, she dies. You leave, she goes home." Billy's voice broke completely. "Please, Thomas. I got no one else left." As Billy rode away, Thomas felt the trap closing around him. Webb hadn't just planned to take his land, he'd planned to take his humanity too, make him choose between his principles and an innocent girl's life. The sun began its descent toward the horizon, painting the sky blood red. In the distance, more riders appeared, not 5 this time, but a dozen or more, forming a wide circle around the property. Too far to shoot, close enough to watch, waiting. Thomas walked inside and pulled out Sarah's Bible, opening to the passage she'd marked in faded ink. "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want." But what he wanted was simple, just to live and die on the land he'd earned. As sunset approached, he heard it, the sound of flames crackling in the distance. They'd started with the old barn on the ridge, the one he'd built first, before the house, before anything else. They were burning his history, piece by piece. The circle of riders tightened. As full darkness fell, Thomas lit a single lantern and placed it in the window. Not surrender, but defiance. If they wanted him, they'd find him easy enough. That's when he heard the whistle. Low, soft, familiar. The same tune Sarah used to hum while hanging laundry. Thomas stepped onto the porch, rifle ready, and saw a small figure crouched by the rose bushes. "Don't shoot, Mr. Garrett. It's me, Jenny." The girl emerged from the shadows, her dress torn, hair tangled with thorns. She was alone. "Child, how did you—" "Ran," she whispered, glancing nervously toward the distant riders. "They kept me in an old cabin up the creek. Fool guard fell asleep drunk." Her eyes were wide but determined. "Daddy told you, didn't he, about them taking me?" Thomas nodded, his heart breaking for Billy Moore. "Risin'." "It's a lie," Jenny said fiercely. "They don't have me. They just wanted you to think they did, wanted Daddy to think they did." She pulled something from her pocket, a small wooden horse, crudely carved. "This was my brother's. He made it before the fever took him. I've been carrying it ever since." Thomas recognized the toy. He'd taught Billy's boy how to whittle it, years ago, when both their families still had futures. "Why tell me this?" Thomas asked. "Because you're the only one left who ain't run or died or sold out." Jenny's voice carried an adult weight no 16-year-old should bear. "My daddy, he ain't weak. He just ain't got nothing left to fight for, 'cept me. But you still got something." She gestured toward the land, the house, the roses. "They killed her, didn't they? Your wife. Not with guns or fire, but with loneliness and fear. Made this place feel empty even while she was dying." Thomas's throat tightened. Sarah had spent her last years watching neighbors leave, friends disappear, the community they'd built crumble away. She'd died clutching his hand, whispering about how quiet the valley had become. "I won't let them take this," he said quietly. Jenny pressed the wooden horse into his palm. Then don't. But don't die for it neither. There's other ways to fight. She melted back into the darkness, heading toward town where she could tell her father she was safe, where she could reveal the railroad company's deception. Thomas held the small carving, feeling its worn edges smoothed by a dead boy's fingers. Sometimes the bravest thing was knowing when to bend so you wouldn't break. Sometimes survival was its own victory. But sometimes a man had to stand and be counted, even if he stood alone. The riders were moving closer. Thomas made his choice by the light of Sarah's lantern. He walked to the barn and led out his horse, saddling her with steady hands despite the rifle fire that erupted from the darkness, warning shots, not meant to kill, but to hurry him along. The riders wanted him gone, not martyred. A dead rancher might bring federal attention they couldn't afford. But Thomas wasn't running. Instead, he rode straight toward Webb's position, hands visible, rifle secured to his saddle. The shooting stopped, confusion rippling through the attacking line. "I want to talk," Thomas called out. Webb emerged from behind a boulder, gun drawn but lowered. "Bit late for negotiation, Garrett." "Not negotiation, revelation," Thomas's voice carried across the valley. "Jenny Morrison's safe in town by now, probably telling everyone how you never really had her, how you lied to her father to make me surrender." Webb's face tightened. "Doesn't matter. You're leaving either way." "Maybe. But first, folks are going to learn some interesting facts about your company's methods, about the accidents that ain't accidents, about the missing deeds and the convenient fires." Thomas smiled coldly. "Funny thing about railroad companies, they need government approval for their routes. Government don't much like companies that use kidnappiness and murder to clear their path. You got no proof. Don't need proof when I got witnesses. Jenny saw your men, heard their plans. She's got a good memory and an honest face." Thomas paused. "Course, all that stops mattering if something happens to her, or to me. Then you got federal marshals asking uncomfortable questions." For long moments, the valley held its breath. Webb's men waited for orders, but their leader was thinking, calculating odds and consequences. Finally, Webb holstered his gun. "This isn't over, Garrett." "Yes, it is." Thomas's voice was granite. "Railroad. Can find another route. There's empty land aplenty without stealing what belongs to others." The riders withdrew into darkness, but Thomas knew they weren't beaten, just delayed. Real change would take time, legal battles, political pressure, but tonight, he'd bought that time. He rode back to his house and lit every lamp, every candle. From the valley floor, his home blazed like a beacon, defiant, beautiful, alive. Years later, when Jenny Morrison had grown and married and brought her children to visit the old rancher, she would remember this night as the moment she learned that courage wasn't the absence of fear, but the presence of something worth protecting. The railroad never did come through Garrett's Valley. They built their line 20 miles south, through land purchased honestly from willing sellers. Thomas Garrett lived another 15 years on his ranch, tending Sarah's roses and teaching neighborhood children to whittle. When he finally passed, peaceful in his sleep, they found Jenny's wooden horse on his nightstand, a reminder that sometimes the smallest gestures carry the greatest weight. The land remains in the family still, worked by distant cousins who never knew why their deed specifies that the roses must always be tended, why every spring someone places fresh flowers on 2 graves beneath the old oak tree. Some battles are won, not with bullets, but with the simple refusal to surrender what cannot be replaced. The roses bloom wild and free, just as Sarah would have wanted. Stories like this aren't just told, they're felt. If you felt it too, subscribe and stay with us.